Hello and welcome to the CK Prahlad Memorial Session. We have with us Nandan Nilekani, the co-founder and chairman of Infosys and the founding chairman of UIDAI, more popularly known as Aadhaar. Nandan, welcome to the session.
Thank you, Kumar.
Nandan, this is obviously a time of massive disruption. And all through the last 8, 9 months, people have been talking about it also as a opportunity to sort of reset and reboot the way we do things. Because of the rapid digitalization, you know, what are some of the key areas where large businesses or even entrepreneurs, startups, the economy in India can actually use this as a reset and reboot moment, both in terms of serving the bottom of the pyramid because of digitalization and also a newer way of growth, which is probably more environment friendly?
Sure. I think there's no doubt that the COVID crisis has accelerated digitization around the world, and things that we thought would take years happen in weeks. It's not that the trends did not exist. The trend towards the cloud, the trend towards AI, smartphones, all that was happening, but it was happening at a slow pace. And what really happened was the acceleration. And the second thing which happened, I think, is that companies' fortunes entirely depended on whether they were digitally ahead or not. I mean, in the retail sector, for example, we had the highest number of retail bankruptcies in the US. At the same time, some retailers who had got their digital strategy right, like Walmart and Target and Home Depot, did very well. So clearly, this has been a defining moment for us. In India in particular, I think it has raised the whole question of how to digitize faster. And we are seeing much more interest from everybody. In terms of India, we also have the advantage of the India stack. So we have a digital platforms for paperless, presence-less, authentication, cashless. And all these are very important in a digital world where you can get your services without meeting anyone, whether you can get your services on the phone. So we see an acceleration of that. Similarly, we are seeing an acceleration of digital in education now, because all the schools are shut down, and all this is taking education through the government's Diksha program, which we have been involved with through one of our foundations, the XTEP Foundation. So I think we are seeing across the board a massive thing, but it's also leading to a digital divide, because those who have the phones can use services, those who don't have cannot. And therefore, I think we have to parallelly work on ensuring that connectivity is ubiquitous, that devices are cheap, that data costs are low, so that people can leverage this whole phenomenon. And all this will lead to, I think, environment friendliness too, because if we can deliver service to people where they are without traveling, if we can reduce traffic on our roads, working from home is a big thing happening now. We expect even post-pandemic that a third of the people will be working from home any given day. So that should reduce the movement around. So hopefully all this will also have positive environmental benefits.
Two very important things you mentioned, Nandan. One is the digital divide. And clearly, earlier the division probably perhaps was on infrastructure. Now, this is not really infrastructure, but, just having access to a mobile phone or a, tab, or not having one. And where do you see this sort of taking, people at the bottom of the pyramid? Do you think this is going to make things worse for them, or do you really see this as an opportunity where companies will be able to step up?
Well, this definitely in the short term makes it difficult for people who don't have devices. Because if now in education, they're trying many things. For example, they're delivering education over the radio, over the television. They are delivering worksheets at home, so people can work on the worksheets and submit them. So they're trying to be inclusive by not entirely depending on a device. But having a device makes it hugely possible. And it's not just one device. What happens in many families is the same device has to be used by the mother and father for their work and for the children's schooling. And so there's contention. Even with the device, there's a contention for the device. So there are a lot of challenges, but I think this will only accelerate the delivery. Fortunately, in India, we have a very widespread mobile network. We have relatively the lowest data costs in the world, and we have many device sellers. But no, there's no question that we have to think of this as infrastructure, just as we think of roads or airports as infrastructure.
When you mentioned about almost a third of the workforce perhaps working from home even post-pandemic, and maybe in certain industries that number could be higher, do you also see a new model of development taking place in India in the next 10, 20 years, where in the past we were almost focusing on 8 or 10 sort of mega cities, or maybe even fewer? And do you see this leading to a more dispersed and probably broader sort of growth going forward?
Oh, absolutely. I think we do expect tier two cities to take a bigger role. People will maybe stay in on the outskirts and come into the city a couple of days a week for their meetings. So I think the dispersal possibilities of this are immense all over the world, including in India. And I think that's good, because if we can, especially for those jobs that are digitally deliverable. I mean, there are many jobs that are proximity based. If you're running an airline or a hotel, you have to be close to the customer. But where you can deliver digitally, and now increasingly a lot of the tech jobs are all of that nature, absolutely you may see a dispersal of people across the country.
Shifting focus a little, Nandan, to the sort of the people aspect. This has obviously also been a very trying time for most people, working from home or not being able to be with family, with parents, elders, being away from home in certain cases. And there's a certain amount of vulnerability across the board, whether somebody's the CEO of a large enterprise or the line manager. And in your personal experience over the last 8, 9 months, how have you managed, uncertainty, some mantras around resilience and agility, and what can people do to remain mentally fit?
Well, I think this is a very difficult time for everyone, and we are all in some sense united that we are all in the same boat, that we are all struggling with this issue. I personally have a very clear belief that, first of all, things will get better. This is not this, there is a time, and we are already seeing that we have 3 very successful vaccines coming, and more will come. So I do believe that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Also, I think it's a good time to keep yourself busy and doing things, because it's best to be active and have a good agenda every day. It's a good time to do work on your physical fitness, exercise. You're not commuting, so you have more time on your hands. It's a good time to increase relationships. One of the things I do, for example, is that I go for walks with different people almost every day, because walking in the park in the open air with a mask 6 feet apart there's no risk in that. No. And I'd much rather meet somebody physically in a park for 1 hour than do a Zoom call for 1 hour.
Right, right. Nandan, at the organizational level, most organizations, I remember being an ex-Infosys, I've been through one of the BCP and disaster recovery processes. And obviously you can't plan for something of this scale, and not deliver on it immediately. So at an organizational level, what would your, expectation be from the chief learning officer, that at a strategic level in 5 or 10 years, what should the culture, the fabric of the organization look like? What would they be asked to deliver to the board, to the CEO? That, how can we prepare the future organization for things of this sort?
Well, of course, one is, of course, the planning to deliver remotely 100% anytime, which is more often a technology issue, because you need to have security, you need to have the devices and so on. But from a people side, I think continuous learning is absolutely critical. Learning needs are going up through the roof, and new knowledge, new skills, new activities are coming up all the time. And every organization will have to be very, very agile, and it has to move all its people to the new world. At Infosys, we have 240,000 employees in 40 countries. And we have a completely advanced learning platform called Lex for all of them. And the average time they're spending on learning is 35 minutes a day. And it's because of the investments we built in this anytime, anywhere, just-in-time learning that we were able to get all our people to new technologies and new ways of doing business. So absolutely creating a continuous learning organization, investing in learning, investing in the learning infrastructure, because we don't know which skills or what learning we need. All we know is that things are going to change. So we have to have those degrees of freedom, the optionalities built into our architecture. That's where I would suggest that learning officers focus.
In terms of crisis management, Nandan, this has almost been like a schooling period for any leadership organization on how to manage a crisis. And what are some takeaways or key learnings that you have seen emerge from this crisis?
Well, I think being prepared, creating a flexible and resilient organization is very important, because you don't know which crisis will come. I don't think anybody's business continuity planning had this kind of crisis in mind. They would have had some physical crisis if there's an earthquake or a tsunami, but this kind of a global crisis, I don't think anybody had anticipated. But those organizations that were well prepared, which had the technology in place, that had the cyber security in place, were able to pull it off much, much better. Also, there are some companies I've seen that were completely came to a halt. One company called Rail Yatri, which is in providing bus services, it just stopped because there were no buses. But they used that time to, reduce cost, to clean up their technology, improve the infrastructure, and soon enough, after 6 months, things improved. So I think you have to be resilient, you have to be adaptable, you have to be agile, you have to be optimistic about the future, and use the time to do things that will prepare you for the next growth path.
So basically, also look at the sort of silver lining within the crisis, and
That's
like
right.
the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, yes.
Coming back, to the economy, Nandan, at the bottom of the pyramid, and I keep coming back to it as, CK's legacy, there is this sense now that India has this massive opportunity to do things differently, right? Because of the experience of the pandemic and because of the times we are in. And do you really see some key areas which can throw up this massive opportunity for India?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I've always been a great admirer of Professor Prahlad. I knew him well as a friend and as a mentor. And I've read all his books, and we are all influenced by him. And a lot of the work I do is really about how to make sure everybody gets access. Like Aadhaar was about giving 1 billion people access to identity. The payment work we did with AEPS and UPI was how do we give access to digital services. The work we do on Step and education is about how to give access to education to all the children, especially those who are vulnerable and poor. And so I think the work we're doing on credit is about how to give access to credit to those who can't get credit. The account aggregator framework is about how to give access to data for 1 billion people. So absolutely, a lot of the work I do is on how to reach everybody. And Professor Prahlad is has been a great mentor and guide, and his ideas have influenced the work that I do.
Thank you so much, Nandan. That's some really great words coming from you. And thank you so much for joining us for the CK Prahlad Memorial Session. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you, Kumar.